I need to thank Julian for kicking off something of a discussion on topics that are usually thought of to be soft topics, but they're actually very hard, complex things to think about, especially when you're talking about large deployments and stuff. We have a mouthful title for this panel. I'm going to read it out because you have to pay attention to everything. Trustworthy AI, enhancing human agency and machine accountability in the age of agentic AI. It's a whole bunch of stuff, but it hides a bit of interesting things inside of it. And to give you context, I'll give you as to why we are talking about it in terms of what LFDT is doing. There are a number of projects inside of LFDT that are focusing on various aspects of what we are going to talk about. Let's take an example. Let's say the gentleman who took a photo of us on the stage today posts it on the internet, and you have a choice to believe three things. Is the photo actually taken by a camera, or is it synthetically generated? Is the photo actually captured by the person who claims to have posted it, or is the creator of it? And did it reach to you through a process whereby you are absolutely certain that the photo was not tampered with? There are projects inside of LFDT that focus on each single part of this. Now, you might actually take a pause and think like, this is not really my problem. It is, because synthetic technologies have gotten to an extent, they're so cheap and off the shelf, that we pretty much cannot believe everything we see on the internet at this point. It was not like this when I was younger, and that was like when dinosaurs roamed the earth. So that's the context. I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves. Sorry about my clumsiness. And then we'll get started. But while they introduce themselves, I'm going to ask them to also explain what does trustworthy AI mean to them. So we do this in the way we are sitting.
Yeah, is this on? All right. Hi, everyone. My name is David Menezes. I serve as the director of programs at a company called People+ai. It's a Bangalore-based AI research lab. Trustworthy AI, one thing we've really found to be a nuance on the ground that people don't say but later are hoping for is predictability. We work with a lot of government departments in deploying AI solutions, and they love the idea of Gen AI. But when it slightly goes beyond their level of predictability in scaling the solution, then they lose trust in the system. And so oftentimes we see trustworthy AI to be the most predictable. You want to generate a response, but you always want the same reliable, predictable response. So it should be generative, but not too generative.
Interesting. Aravind.
Yeah. So I'm Aravind. I head the blockchain practice of IDS as a global vice president. And I have been leading lots of enterprise blockchain implementations across multiple industry verticals. And Gen AI practice at IDS kind of got started a year back, and we started working in certain use cases, especially education sector, which is basically polyversity, which I'll be talking as we progress. But I think one thing which I heard like 4 or 5 years back, mostly when pitching blockchain is, blockchain is a solution waiting for problem. And I think AI plus blockchain is definitely a very beautiful problem solution pair in the context of bringing trust to something which we created, but which the creation also creates. So I think that is where the mirroring effect is coming up, and obviously blockchain needs to differentiate the reality and the created reality. Thank you.
Jollydeep.
Hi everyone, I'm Jollydeep Kaur. I lead the marketing at NxtGen. At NxtGen we do a slightly crazy job, but lots of fun in making sovereign AI and cloud platforms for India. Now, I would like to say that we are basically in the business of making the buzzwords that you talk about into reality. There are a lot of things that we want to make them the real world problem-solving solutions. That's what we believe in. When we talk about trustworthy AI, personally for me, I think an AI, like you just mentioned in your starting note, that when a picture is taken, how do you identify the source, where it came from, who's responsible for it? I think there's lots beyond it, right? But what is it that I could rely on? What are the parameters I can control to ensure that there's trust that is developed from both sides? So I think trustworthy AI definitely means that we are able to create transparent systems. We have control on the domain that we are working on. So when we harp on sovereignty in our organization, we think about what are the parameters in our control that we can work with, like where the data is stored, how it is stored, what kind of systems we are working with. So these things are some of the little things that can help us establish the trust platform. Thank you.
I'm Kamlesh Nagware, co-founder of FSV Labs and co-chair Hyperledger India chapter, which is LFDT, one of the open source community. And I think my perspective, trustworthy AI is two things. One is a verifiable AI, another is a responsible AI.
I find it very interesting, and I'm in love with this panel because they have touched upon some of the topics that we don't even talk about in forums. Predictability, how do you define trust? Because you're talking about machine systems, and now you're also talking about trust. We generally understand trust as a very human concept. Humans trust each other, machines actually verify and validate. But we are beyond that stage now. So I'm going to come back to you, Kamlesh, because I want to riff off something Rishikesh and Ankita spoke about in the previous panel, is that the scale of doing things in India. And I know it has been beaten to death that you do things in India, it's scale. But what does it mean that when we are talking about DPI 1.0 and DPI 2.0, and how does all of this AI and agentic systems fit into the scheme of things, and what are the trends that you are seeing?
So I think India is always popular about the DPI and how we're leveraging from Aadhaar to UPI to, and now this DLT blockchain and AI is coming with in the traditional DPI. For example, CBDCs could be another DPI for as a kind of verifiable money, for example. Other thing, DigiAta, I think very popular, is one of the DLT AI-based infrastructure, right? It looks like a verifiable identity, but it includes biometric, AI verification, face recognition, all is AI engines, and that is working at scale, right? And I think this is the initiative that is currently going on, but I think how the Aadhaar is coming with the Aadhaar 2.0 or how the national blockchain framework, which is running at the scale in India, and I see the academia, because I part of a couple of academia, like IIT Madras. So now we are working on some couple of initiative with the responsible AI. We have separate center for responsible AI and center for cybersecurity and blockchain. So how we leveraging these two technologies and create the scalable infrastructure, and building for country like India, we need the scale for the billion people, right?
I want to ask you, David, about the fact that every time technology cycles come, one of the things that happen is this too soon? The end consumer kind of has this pushback that is this too soon? Like, for instance, when you had industrial machine looms being introduced, the pushback was that is this too soon because livelihoods are going to be affected and all of that. So with agentic AI, whose premise is that a lot of decision making would be delegated and would be given off to agentic systems and agents running at scale, are we thinking of giving up too much too soon?
Yeah, so I think in the context of India, it's both yes and no.
Okay.
Like when you think about consumer AI, 90% of the cover letters we receive, 90% of the messages I receive are all written with AI. So at a consumer level, just each individual using AI, we've kind of over-indexed on using ChatGPT for everything. But when you think about enterprises adopting AI, a large part of our work at People+ai is building public interest AI. So essentially what that means is working with not-for-profits, working with social enterprises, working with government departments, and figuring out how do you deploy AI to citizens. And in those domains, we often find a lot of skepticism. And the only way we've been able to tackle that is a methodology called human in the loop. So oftentimes when you're working, say in primary health centers, you'd have a resident doctor that's giving a diagnosis to patients. And you'd probably have an AI tool that would capture the prescription and then automate a call to them a month later to check whether they're coming for their follow-up. And so we've seen a lot of AI systems that are agentic, but to ensure its quality, and like I said, to ensure its predictability, that's where the skepticism lies. And especially when you think about deploying at scale, guardrails have to really, really be well built in. And so to ensure that happens, we have found a lot of gaps where you have an amazing prototype to actually productize something at scale, to build that trust, to build that testing framework, to build that reliability again and again and again. We found that the average, for those of you who work in the voice AI space, in your typical call center, you would probably test a sample of 1% of calls. So you'd say, these calls are being recorded for quality assurance purposes, and a human agent would, sample through 1% of calls. We found for AI-based calling, you'd have to minimum sample 10%. So that means your testing framework is 10x of your average human-based system. And so in many cases, we have, I would say at a consumer level, yes, we've kind of over-indexed, we've hyper-indexed on it. But when we think about the diversity of India and where adoption can really play out, I think we're still scratching the tip of the iceberg.
I'll follow up. Do you think that this idea that the playbook has changed, what used to happen before is now going to have to become far more pervasive, far more depth there has to be, and the heft? Is this something that organizations that are adopting AI or even like building for AI, they're able to anticipate and do change for?
Yeah, see, most of the context I'd give here is with governments adopting AIs and, not-for-profits or large-scale national programs adopting AI. There's a whole, set of enterprise AI solutions where there's, quite a robust framework. But when it comes to deploying public interest AI, the largest barrier that you hit is linguistic diversity. Whereas if you lab test an English model, typically your word error rate is anything less than 95% is well passes. But if you're trying to now deploy Indic language AI solutions, typically what happens is a lot of background noise. Your average ASR will now be in the accuracy of, say, just 60, 70%. And organizations that claim that they've fully cracked it, the moment you go outside a metro city, you'll realize that the quality dips so fast. Every kilometer outside you go, literally you lose another 1%. And so at that point, to then have agentic AI solutions, it quickly fails. And the large reason is even the transcription that you send to your large language model is you've lost so much of context along the way that the agents fail not because of badly designed agentic models, but you need a minimum quality of infrastructure. And in a country like India, that's usually very robust automatic speech recognition systems and very, very robust text-to-speech models. And unless you have those two, you can have very, very advanced LLMs that are, the largest parameters. But if the input and the output is not steady, then at a population scale, it typically fails. So
We keep hitting this idea of population scale, doing for mass, but all of that requires the most important thing, right? Infrastructure. You have to build out the infrastructure to be able to deliver that. I have a question for you, Jollydeep. It's about, in terms of infrastructure and the trends that you see in the market, what are the things that stand out as this is slightly different than what was happening before AI? There's a pre-AI and now there's this, we are in the AI era.
So I think there are three major trends that we are seeing. One is the use of open source. Like people are now open to open source. Earlier, there was a myth they would want a licensed enterprise system. Today, people are ready to experiment. They're ready to trust something which is open source. So this is one major key trends that we see. The other aspect is around the excitement around agentic workflows, how they can work, what is it that we could do with it, what are the experiments we can create, how is it that we could make it more useful for a real world application. That is one trend. The third is, I think, the emergence of more awareness from the government side in terms of what are the kind of governance models or principles that we can create to ensure that whatever is being put out in the system, like people are going towards open source, creating these applications or agentic workflows, how is it that we could guardrail, make sure the data is trusted, make sure the systems are able to handle this kind of. I think these are the three key emerging trends that we see in the going world.
I'm going to come back to the governance thing because I have a question for every one of you on the panel. But we talked twice now about guardrails, and I'm going to swing back to Aravind to ask, what are the guardrails or good design practices when you are thinking of creating AI-based flows and creating virtual realms and kind of creating that digital twin and all of that? Essentially, tell us, what did you do right with Polyversity?
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, I mean, for me, when I see the technology at a broader scale, the first layer is typically now people talking about DPI, right? Now with blockchain decentralized DPI, where an ecosystem decides who will be stakeholders in maintaining that infrastructure. And then on top of it, DID, which is the identity layer, so that each stakeholder, whether it is human or an AI agent, would be identified for what they are and what they can do. And then on top of it, DPGs, which is nothing but digital public goods. I mean, it can be any D app now. So it can be a D app, it can be a digital experience or whatever. Now, what we are doing with Polyversity is creating these three layers for education system. So we picked up one niche, and we are working closely with AICT and Ministry of Education in building this. And the decentralized DPI, the infrastructure, what we have created over last 3 years is 140 plus validator plus mirror nodes being maintained by universities across the country. So we have 140 plus academic partners maintaining this infrastructure layer called Bharat Blockchain Network. And then on top of it, we have an ID layer, which is mapped to the functional ID, which is created for education sector called APAR ID, which identifies every student uniquely. I mean, it is basically one-time verification, and then on top of it, whatever they do, right? And then on top of it, we are creating this DPGs basically. And one of that kind of D app or DPG is the ecosystem metaverse, what we are creating. Mm-hmm. Now, universities across the country are located at different places, but now we are bringing all of them together into one layer, one virtual layer where the virtual campuses of all these universities are set up. Now, coming to the AI plus blockchain side of it. So imagine a student creates their profile on Polyversity, which is a university ecosystem metaverse. Then the first thing is their APAR ID mapped to their individual profile, and that mapped to an avatar which accesses this virtual world. So that way the identity is established. And whatever they do in physical campus or virtual campus are going as credentials. It can be the typical academic credentials, event credentials, or micro credentials,
so
whatever.
Who they are and what they have. Both of the who they are being the identity, what they have being the credentials that were accumulated.
So it's a student. Then the credentials can be their academic certificates or skill badges or the hackathons or events which they participate, and the certifications, the skill certifications which they typically do. Mm-hmm. But then we have another avenue called Opportunity Park within that virtual world, where if you have a skill badge, you can access the virtual HQ seamlessly just because you have that that skill badge. Mm-hmm. And then you start accessing the virtual internships, what someone can typically do. So that way we are creating a seamless identity layer, and then on top of it, credential layer, and then on top of it, experiences. So that, we see Polyversity as a way in terms of, it's not just digital transformation of education system, but it is digital transcendence for the entire campuses to be like fully digital and their identity. And ultimately, the last thing, I mean, what we are seeing in next 2 to 3 years is every student on Polyversity would have a personalized AI agent which understands the profile, the journey of the student within the campus, and start recommending or doing career advice or mock interviews or matching them for internships or job opportunities or helping them map some pitching sessions in the innovation hub what we are creating. So now coming back to trustworthy AI, unless until we have a verifiable data, authentic data, and coming back to your original question of guardrail, now for an individual having an digital twin or a twin AI agent, right? The first premise for guardrail is the verifiable data of the profile, the verifiable identity, and the verifiable credentials, verifiable interests, which are all timestamped so that the context is understood. And once the AI agent within that guardrail scope understands the context, then interactions, communications, everything would have, I mean, would happen seamlessly. And that is what, that is how we see Polyversity is working towards.
That's actually a rich experience in terms of like putting together all the pieces that are there in terms of identity, credentialing, and all of that, and ensuring that you provide an opportunity for the holder of the credentials and the digital identity to be able to see how far they can go in terms of broadcasting their intent and being able to get things that meet the intent criteria through some kind of matching and all of that. I think we are kind of at the top of the allocated time for us. So I'm going to ask all of you one by one to kind of imagine what is the critical regulatory or governance or any kind of policy change that you would like to see, given that at your individual level and organization levels you are dealing with deployment of AI or AI and blockchains at scale, and you see that there are certain, in some cases we have path dependency, by which I mean that our laws, regulations, or frameworks are dependent on things that used to be, but those things that used to be do not kind of translate well into this new realm that we are building together. So what would be the one thing that you'd want to, and I build this on top of what Jollydeep mentioned, that this governance is one of the key things. So Kamlesh.
Yeah. So I think whether it's a blockchain or AI, I think the governance is very important, right? So, and I think the policy around the governance, like what data is coming to the, whether it's a blockchain ecosystem, whether it's AI, and whether it's the agentic AI communication. So we need a governance around that one, because what is the responsibility AI? If AI, let's say some deep fake is being created, so how are you going to ensure that whether this particular content is a deep fake or is a original? So need a governance around this one. I think that's why there are a couple of initiatives already happening in India. Let's say India AI mission, for example, and what IIT Madras doing is a Center for Responsible AI. So they're creating some kind of responsible AI framework. So what could be the policy and framework to define the particular AI agent or AI is a responsible or the trustworthy or not? And even for doing that thing, you need a proper infrastructure level registry, because you can't have a let's say AI registry or AI framework or silos in the ecosystem, right? You need a proper decentralized registry at the India level or government level, where every agent who is in the place, in workplace, is identified using the decentralized identity, and what is allowed to do, what data can they share. All need to have governance policies around all this ecosystem and being deployed on some kind of decentralized infrastructure.
David.
Yeah, I think one thing that's often looked when you think about governance and working with AI. So if you have any sort of Gen AI solution that you're trying to deploy for an enterprise, typically you have your database where you'll have to input it, and that database safety is a real critical thing. So for most organizations that use closed source LLM models, at a personal level, I can probably upload my an ID of mine to fill a form. But now if an enterprise is doing it for a large-scale AI, Gen AI operation, to ensure that database safety and security is a very, very hard thing to do. And so the more you think about, enterprise-level AI adoption, a really big overlooked factor is not the output, but really the input of data from your database into your LLM. And APIs there are difficult to track. It's where the data eventually gets saved and stored is difficult to solve for. And so unless you have an effective way of masking that, you can have huge database systems that will not, you okay?
Good.
Yeah, so it's quite common to have huge database systems that where you can't, while you think there's more data, there's more opportunity for Gen AI, but the safety of that data is a really tough thing to solve for.
Aravind.
Yeah. So I think the DPDP is already happening, right? And functional IDs are already happening. So I think enough of regulations, at least at a national level. But what I believe is with blockchain, it's all protocol driven. But if you go little deeper, it is self-governance, right? And I think we need to think at a humanity scale. I think now every country have implemented citizen scale regulations, citizen scale infrastructures and all. But are we really thinking humanity scale things? And I think that is where the real consensus should happen, like planet scale or humanity scale. Because with AI, who owns the context? See, content can be owned, but how will you own the context? It is a shared asset. Now, how do you bring that shared asset and shared governance so that everyone who is participating gets benefited fairly, proportionally? And I think that is where the value layer, which is blockchain, and then the intelligence layer, which is very intangible, can be kind of brought together. And I'm just throwing this because what I felt is I saw all the regulations continent-wise, country-wise, but somewhere I felt like we are dealing with something intangible with a divisive mindset in terms of regulating it. And I think finding a way out is what I feel we should be thinking and working towards.
I wish it were possible to actually kind of take the stream of thought that you have and spin it out into a separate conversation at some point in time soon, because there's a whole bunch of stuff in that to unpack and explore. Would you be comfortable?
Yeah, I will say something. So, yeah, sorry for this, but I would like to stir up a controversy here, right?
Go for it.
There's a long time that all of us has actually, compromised our privacy with use of WhatsApp and Facebook and all these kinds of social media things. Now talking about trustworthy AI or building such kind of systems, I think it's a little too far away for us. We should look at parameters that we can control. If we want to ask our government or create some governance models around how do we trust what we are building, I think first thing is we understand the depth of sovereignty. Now, sovereignty is sort of a very misused term, right? Today, we say data localization, data residency, and we solve it. But that's not all about, right? Sovereignty. We need to have operational sovereignty, we need to have technological sovereignty. Open source gives us that leverage, that we bring in the technological sovereignty in peace. How do we train people? So the short staffing that we have on skilled workers, that needs to be worked upon to ensure that we have control on who the people within our country who are able to support these technologies that we are building. So these are very important points that we need to understand. So understanding the jurisdictions of laws that these foreign hyperscalers get into our country. Microsoft just shut off the tap for Naira, right? The data was all locked. So it's not about where your data is hosted, but it's also about who controls the data. We bring these parameters into our control. If our governance model helps us bring these parameters into control, I think then we can start talking about the other aspects of how do we build trustworthy frameworks and things like that. That's my opinion.
And I think it's fair because without a baseline set of rules and essentially what the rules for playing on the field are, we are going to be blindsided by a whole bunch of technology-led unintended consequences that come about. I'm going to kind of wrap up the panel here. Thank all the expert panelists for making time in their day to be able to do this. I hope it was enjoyable for you all. Before we wrap up, the call to action is fairly simple. The Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust has a whole bunch of projects within its large umbrella that focuses on many aspects of this. I would encourage you to share links to that with your team members, people you know who might be interested in this, because this is something that we are not going to solve today, but we have to take on these hard questions, because otherwise, if we don't do this, 3 years down the line, we'll find ourselves in a very tricky position. Let me just put it diplomatically that way. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.